sometimes we feel as though, oh, I went to this conference and I read this book, I listened to this podcast, therefore I am a great Christian because I am inspired and I am pumped. But never in that journey was there ever a conversation with God? Was there even space to hear from God? There was never a moment to sit with God. And we just have this noisy, busy Christianity that's empty of intimacy.
Faith, welcome to the Happy Hour.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is great. This is your first time on the Happy Hour, which is exciting.
Yes, it really is.
It's episode number 617. So there have been a lot of interviews over here at the Happy Hour, and I'm really glad to have you. Now, you and I met this past spring for a hot minute, but I wanted you to introduce yourself to my listeners.
Yes, my name is Faith Eury Cho. I'm a mama of 4 and 2 dogs. I'm a pastor, pastor's wife. We church planted in northern New Jersey, and we co-pastor Mosaic Covenant Church. Let's see. I'm also the CEO and founder of the Honor Summit, where we equip and activate Asian American women. And yeah, author, speaker, all the good things.
You're doing all of the things.
All the things. Yeah, it's busy. It's busy. It's a little
It's busy. We have a lot in common and some things that are drastically different. I also have 4 children, and we were talking before we're recording this on the day that all of my kids are back in school today. So we took my oldest to college yesterday, which was a big thing. Okay. Huge. And then my other 3, today's their first day of school. So I literally feel like I could conquer the world today. Like I could conquer the world. I sent a text out to a bunch of friends and I'm like, I can do anything today. What do you need from me? I can do it all.
Yeah.
So I understand the mama to 4 thing for sure.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, I mean, you're a little ahead of me, and so I can't wait to feel that way. I think I feel the opposite. Like, oh my gosh, because mine are still, they're very little, and so I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gonna need so much. We're gonna have to wake up so early, lunch packed every day. So it's a different stage, but equally as
I'm going to tell you, I'm the mom that last night, the night before the first day of school, my husband Aaron made steaks for us. Like we had a great big meal to celebrate. And then my kids were like, so what should we pack at our lunches? And I'm like, okay, so about that, like I'm going to go to the grocery store later this week, but here's some money. So I'm running a little bit behind as well. Faith, I'm so glad you're here. And I want to talk about your book that just released into the world yesterday, Experiencing Friendship with God, How the Wilderness Draws Us into His Presence. And when I saw this book that you were working on this and it was coming out, I thought, I will never get old. Like it will never get old to me talking about how, to use your subtitle, the wilderness draws us into His presence. And I don't know if it's my age. I don't know if it's the day we live in. I don't know, because I think that everyone in every generation has felt this way.
Yeah.
But Faith, I see more wilderness than I have in a long time. And so I want you to just talk to us. Why this book? Why now? Why the wilderness? All the things.
Yes. I mean, no one enjoys the wilderness. I know I haven't. When people ask me, well, what was your wilderness like? My answer is oftentimes, well, which one? Right?
Right.
Like which wilderness, which season? But I would say, I feel like a lot of the Christian conversation these days is about how to break through, how to get to the promised land, how to get to your dream, how to get to the other side, how to just make it. When I read through scripture, I realized, wait, but a lot of the most beautiful, magnificent stories that we talk about in the Bible were actually in the wilderness. The manna, the pillar of fire, the pillar of cloud, the glory, that was all in the wilderness. And so much happened in the wilderness. And this is not to say that we belong in the wilderness. There's absolutely no wilderness season that is forever. Only the presence of God is forever. However, sometimes we miss the point. The purpose of the wilderness was never to get to the promised land. The purpose of the wilderness was to befriend the presence of God. And I think oftentimes when we're just thinking about just making it through, heal me, God, answer this prayer, God, make this breakthrough, God. I think sometimes we just miss the beauty and the purpose of that season.
It is so true that we can do that. And, I can look back, Faith, and think of some of my wilderness seasons.
Yeah.
And I've said often I would never want to go through them again, but they taught me so much that I wouldn't have
Yeah.
learned otherwise.
Yeah.
So I want
Hmm.
you to take us back. You told me that this book has been in the making for 20 years, and that is a
Yeah.
long time. So I would
Yeah.
love for you to tell me, why has it been in the making in your own personal life for 20 years? What was going on 20 years ago that started you
Yeah.
on this journey?
Well, 20 years ago, I was at a youth camp, and it's funny because it was called like a vision camp,
Uh
and it
huh.
was telling kids like God will give you visions and so on and so forth. And I mean, I just went just to go. I went for a good time. But I remember in prayer, I just received this image, and I didn't even know it was a vision, because I was so young at that time. But it was just, I just saw in the image of my mind all these books, and I just felt this impression in my heart from the Lord, like, you're going to be writing books. But back then, I mean, being a young Asian American girl, um, just and not even that, I didn't really come from a Christian home
Hmm.
either. My discovery of the Lord was completely just between me and God. I never went to church. My parents were not Christian. It was just
Wow.
a pursuit of the Lord. And so for him to be like, you're gonna do this thing, that was wild to me. It really
Mhm.
was. My very first church experience was Willow Creek. And so I grew up with hearing about these books like Case for Christ by Lee Strobel, The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren. So the idea of someone like me writing a book, that was
Mm.
so wild. But that 20-year journey was just simply just me in the presence of God. So when people are asking me these days about what's the formula, like what's the formula to be a speaker, what's the formula to being a female leader, to being an author, I'm like, I don't have one. Like my only thing was I just walked in friendship with God,
Mm.
and I just followed him. I
Mm.
really did. And that's truly my only formula. And so walking through these seasons where it was just me and the Lord, and him bringing me to the right places, connecting me to the right people, even just me meeting you in the spring, those moments, that was just truly birth from friendship.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, when everybody wants a formula to get out of terrible seasons, a formula to level up, to get to that next level of life, I think it's important to get back to the timeless truth that
Mm.
really we were just built for a friendship with the presence of God.
Okay, you talk about this friendship with the presence of God, and I want
Yeah.
you to dive into that. So I'm
Hmm.
just imagining a listener going, okay, Faith, okay, Jamie, presence with God. I can't see him. I can't, like, where
Yes.
is he? What does that mean? So, what is go back to the most practical things. What do you mean when you say literally
Mm,
just being with the presence of God? Because I think that can feel scary to some people, it can feel intimidating,
absolutely.
all the things.
Absolutely.
But it's what friendship is. So expand on
Yeah.
what that looks like to be in the presence of God.
Yeah. I think sometimes we forget that Christianity is about a person. I mean, that
Mm,
person being God, right?
mhm,
But I think sometimes we make it really about information or a political position, or it's just like our inspiration for the day. But actually, it's really about a person. And when we are not making about that friendship, then we miss out on the gift of the gospel entirely,
mm,
right? And I think when it comes down to the basics, I mean, when at the moment of salvation, receive the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit remains with us always.
mm,
And that in itself is a miracle. The fact that the Holy Spirit can be grieved, can be quenched, and yet it never says that he just leaves when it's too hard.
mm,
And so oftentimes we have this gift of his presence, but we have no awareness. It's like the way I like to describe it is this: once my husband got me a guitar, and for the, I don't know, like the 10 years that I've had this guitar, I've just learned to play like three chords on it.
uh-huh.
And I like to say I have a guitar, but I don't access this guitar.
Mhm,
And the same is like having the presence of God. Yes, you are a Christian, and whether you go to church once a year or every day, You
Mm-hmm.
have the presence of God, but do you access it? Do you access that friendship? Are you engaged with him? Are you aware of him?
Mm.
And that's where the concept of practicing the presence of God happens. And that's a concept that was made popular by Brother Lawrence, from the book, The Practice of the Presence of God. And I remember I first picked it up when I was at a stage in my Christian walk where I was like, I want more. Like I just don't. I feel very disconnected. I want more, so I would just scour through the bookstores, and it was like this sliver of a book. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's short, and it looks simple. And I remember reading it, and just it felt like watching someone enjoy the best meal ever,
Mm.
and I'm just watching. Like, when you're watching the Food Network and
Yeah.
they're like, this is the best. And you're like, that's great.
Uh-huh.
That must be nice for you, happy for you. But I didn't know how I could access it myself. And I'm not a Carmelite monk. I'm like I don't live in that time. What
Yeah.
does that mean for the modern day believer that has this complicated life? There were no notifications on phones for Brother
Mm.
Lawrence. Like, what does that
Mm-hmm.
mean for me? And how can I get the real thing and enjoy the gift of the gospel today? And
Mm.
so, yeah, that's why it's important. That's why it's a lifelong journey that I myself have gone through.
I love it so much. One of the things that caught me from the very beginning of the book, you said
Mhm.
this: good works, noble character, and wisdom are meant to be the result of our intimacy with his presence. They aren't the way
Yeah.
to achieve that intimacy. Before
Yeah.
living to be good or to do good, we must live to know him. And
Yeah.
that caught my attention because, as someone who's been following Jesus for over 2 decades, the tendency or the trap that I
Mm,
could find myself in is, if I'm just doing the right things, if I'm being
right.
good, I don't have any of
Yeah.
these major sins in my life, then I'm
Yeah.
with God. But I'm
Mm,
trying to use those things to be with him instead of being with him to get those things. So let's talk
yes.
about that for a second. How does that play out with a lot of Christian women these days, of trying to
Mm,
be something for God instead of being with God to be something?
yes, absolutely. I think sometimes we just miss his presence
Mm,
because we settle for substitutes.
hmm.
you know More than ever before, there are Christian resources that are accessible to all of us. So I think sometimes we feel as though, oh, I went to this conference and I read this book, I listened to this podcast, therefore I am a great Christian because
Yeah.
I am inspired and I am pumped. But
Mm.
never in that journey was there ever a conversation with God. Was there even space to hear from God? There was never a moment to sit with God. And we just have this noisy, busy Christianity
Mm.
that's empty of intimacy. And
You
then
said, I
when
want to stop right there. You said this noisy, busy Christianity that is empty of God.
yes. Yeah, and
I'm prone to that. Like, and I like have a
me too.
faith-based podcast, and my husband's a pastor, and I love Jesus.
Yes, absolutely. And then we wonder, man, why did I burn out?
Mm.
And we wonder, where is that vitality? Why do I feel underwhelmed by my walk with Jesus? And where's the real thing? And sometimes we feel like we are just like oversold this God that isn't that great, you know?
Mm.
And perhaps it's because we've settled with the substitutes. We've settled with his shadow instead of seeking his face.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, if our lives with Jesus isn't filled with moments with him directly, then we're missing the point.
Missing the
We're missing
point.
the point. And even for me as a church planter, I mean, oh my goodness, like I would do so much for him without him, and I would try to become like him without him, and we do all these things without him. And then we wonder, man, why is it hard?
Hmm.
Why do I rather just scroll through Netflix and scroll on social media endlessly? Why is it that my heart doesn't desire God anymore? And that's because we have just substituted him,
Mm.
replaced him.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that that noise that we can hear and substitute is constant, and that's a battle that we have to fight. But I
Mhm.
want to switch a little bit. We started a little bit with this wilderness conversation. And I don't know
Yeah.
about you, Faith, but to me, when I'm in the wilderness per se, whatever that might look like with suffering or hardship or whatever it is, to me, the noises around me get quieter. And
Mm.
and I just feel like in those moments, I want and need God so much
Yeah.
that it's almost like I yearn for him more. And I've had a lot of people
Mm.
on the show who have said
Mhm.
in some of their hardest times, they felt the closest to the
Yeah.
Lord. And
Mhm.
I can agree with that as well. So I'd love for you to talk about what does it look like for us to really feel that God is enough in those wilderness seasons as we're walking through the hardships. You do that in your book when you
Yeah.
recount Israel's journey and Paul's journey. Like, what does it look like for us to really feel that God is enough in the midst of those wilderness seasons?
Oh, absolutely. I remember some of my toughest times, like real trauma, toughest times, I'd have friends that'd be like, "I'll pray for you." And I would get so mad.
Uh-huh.
Like, I that's not enough for me. It's so interesting because pain reveals our theology.
Mm.
Pain really reveals what we genuinely believe about the presence of God. And
Mm.
it's so interesting because in the Bible, you see that the presence of God alone led and fed an entire nation for 40 years. And yet for me, I'm like, it's not enough. It's not enough.
Right.
Right. And so pain reveals that. Pain reveals the cracks in the foundation of our faith. But the gift of pain is that it ushers us into the deeper things of
Mm.
God, where times of celebration and happiness and comfort cannot do.
Mm.
Right. I remember in some of my toughest moments, I felt like I was Jacob wrestling with the angel, like wrestling with God, right? Wrestling with God. And I remember in those times, even though it was tough, what he was doing, he was revealing himself to me. In those moments in the wilderness, it's easy to feel that you were abandoned by God. Actually, he's revealing himself.
Mm.
And he's revealing the parts of him that you didn't believe in. And sometimes it does take that season of darkness to see him shine bright.
Mm.
And I remember, I start the book off with my story when I was in the NICU with my son. And that was when my theology and reality just really was just colliding. Because I'm like, wait, I believe that God is a healer. How come God's not healing? Like, I don't understand,
Mhm.
like, what's going on. God, if you're going to just do whatever you want, what's the point of praying? And when
Mm.
our faith results to nothing in that moment, whereas seemingly nothing, it's just so easy to feel like, well, then what is the point of faith?
Mm.
If you're not going to answer me, if you're not going to help me, what is the point? And that was what I was wrestling with. And I believe that's what so many Christians are wrestling with. And that's why there's so much talk about deconstructing and leaving the church, because we're like, wait, we believed, but then we were left with nothing, and we
Mhm.
feel so abandoned. And I remember in those moments, the one particular that I address in the start of my book, I remember when my son was in the NICU and I just had this moment with God where I'm like, forget it. I'm not going to pray. I don't even care anymore. Um, I remember feeling this nudge from God, give thanks. And I'm
Mm.
like, and I literally said back to God, I'm not thankful for anything. Like, be thankful for what? Give thanks for what?
Mm.
My son is on a breathing machine. And you can't even tell me I didn't pray for that kid.
Mhm.
What is the point? But I felt it again. Give thanks. And I remember, up until that point, I thought giving thanks was just ignoring all your problems.
Mm.
I didn't realize that giving thanks was just choosing to fix your eyes on the fingerprints of God all over your life. And so I remember the first 5 minutes, I was just an immature brat before God. Like, honestly, I was just like, oh, thank you for this day, thank you, whatever,
Yeah.
thank you for the weather. But after 30 minutes, I remember my heart began to thaw, because the more
Mm.
you gaze at God in your times of pain, you will become more aware of God than your pain.
Mm. Say it
And
again.
that's why worshiping in your times of sorrow, in your times of loss, it's not just for God, it's
Mm.
for you. Because as you gaze at him, the more you gaze at him, it's a mind, body, and soul that becomes just more immersed in this awareness that he is with you, he is for you, he cares, and he is good.
Mm.
Right? So I remember just after 40 minutes, just starting to weep because I was just so deeply aware that Jesus was with me. Before the 40 minutes, I was just aware that my life sucked. Like that, for lack of better words. I was just aware that things were really, really hard. You
Yeah.
know, that was where my awareness was. And whatever you're aware of, you will feel.
Mm.
You know, that will determine your experience. What your mind is aware of, your whole body will feel. That will determine your experience. But when he's asking you to give thanks, when he's asking you to worship, it's not saying ignore your problems. It's saying don't ignore God,
Mm.
you know, and be aware of him. And he wants you to be immersed with his presence. And I remember just
Mm.
weeping, feeling so much love in my heart in such a supernatural way that at the end, even though the nurses were still coming in to tell me that my son wasn't doing any better, I remember feeling this peace that was beyond all understanding.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, that's enough.
Mm.
You know, I remember feeling, and this was just a genuine conviction that I could not have conjured up on my own, but I remember thinking, it's enough.
Mm.
And it is well. It is well with my soul. You know, I mean, later my son turned out all right. Like he's fine. He's doing great. He's thriving. But yeah, that was definitely a moment for me when I was able to practice the presence of God in my own wilderness.
You know, Faith, it makes me think there's like two sides of this coin that I hear you talking about. Sometimes people are like, you know what? If you just give it all over to God, he's not going to make you go through hardships. He's going to take all your pain away. He is going
Mm,
to relieve you from all of this.
yeah.
Well, that sounds great, but
Yeah.
we know that's not true. And then what you're
Mm,
saying is like in that moment, and I love your example of being in the NICU and having to find things that you're grateful for. In
mm,
that moment, nothing changed about your circumstances.
yeah.
And I think that is the key for living in the presence of God. And I love how you said what you're aware of was what you feel. Is that what you said? What you're aware of?
Mm-hmm.
Because what you did was God didn't miraculously heal your son in that moment. And we do know
Mm,
that God can do that, but he changed something in you
mm,
because of your change towards him. And I just think that is a beautiful concept for us to think about because I know that there are women listening to us right now, our voices, who are in their darkest days.
yeah.
And it makes me sad with them and I feel their pain. I
Mm,
hear their pain when they send me
mm,
messages.
mm,
And I just hope, as you were talking, I was like, these women are going to feel so seen and so known and
mm.
so loved because of
Yes.
your words and because of the love of the
Mm,
Father. So I'm really grateful for this book and this
mm,
journey that you've been on. I want to
thank
switch
you.
gears for just a second. When did you and your husband plant your church?
We planted, well, it's funny because the first weekend of our team meetings was the first weekend of lockdown.
Okay.
So that was fun. That was so great.
You're not the only one I've heard that. Like I've heard other people that are like, so we started a new church and we opened in March of 2020, and everyone's like, wow. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Here we are, towards the end of 2023, and I
Mm,
always think like, man, what a crazy thing we've all lived through, and the way that
right.
it's affected us all has been
Mhm.
different in some ways and alike in a lot of ways. And
Right.
one of the things I'm interested to hearing from church leaders is, as you've been leading your people and as you've been pastoring them through what we've been through in the last couple of years, I would
Mhm.
love to hear two things from you as a
Yeah.
pastor. I would
Mhm.
love to hear, man, as you look back on these last 3 years, what has been really hard? Like maybe you didn't expect this, or what has been really hard. But I
Mm,
don't want to
mhm.
end there. I want you to also tell me, like, in the last 3 years, we've all walked through such hardship, but where do you find hope? And you can tell me hope for your local church. That's great. Or where do
Yeah.
you see hope for the body of believers as a whole?
Yeah. Oh, yes. What has been hard in the past 3 years? I would say, um, I think it's the increased jadedness.
Mm,
I think 2020 and 2021, a lot of people felt like, wow, I realized church doesn't work for me.
mm,
And now church has become optional, because I think we like to feel, well, I'm saved, so therefore, it's fine. I think because of the limitations of what the church was, and because we were not ready in a lot of ways, and there
mhm,
was it exposed a lot of where we didn't have the vitality, we didn't have the life that we thought that we did, and so a lot of people got disappointed in the church, and the limitations of it in 2020. So therefore, I feel like there's a lot of people that have just given up
mm,
on convening with the body of Christ.
yeah.
I think where I have much hope is that more than ever before, people want the real thing. People want the real thing. People are hungrier for the presence of God than ever before. People
Mm,
are realizing, okay, all this is great, but it's not enough. I want the real thing. They want the real thing for their churches. They want the real thing for their families and for their lives. And so I would say preaching about the presence of God, um, if it was difficult at all in the past, before 2020, it's not as difficult now
that's good
because the
news.
hunger level is
Mhm,
just so high where people are like, oh, wait, like that wasn't it? Does me
mm,
reading a Christian book, like that wasn't it? Like there's more? Like God is actually with me and wants to
mm.
talk to me. I could hear from God too. I could live like the book of Acts too. And so yeah, that gives me a lot of hope.
I love that so much. And I hear that from a lot of leaders. It's really, really true.
Mhm.
And I think that there are some themes kind of going around in our country for sure, North America Christianity, but around the world too, about that authenticity. And I see
Yeah.
that a lot, Faith, with their upcoming, college kids and 20s.
Mhm.
They literally are yearning for
Yeah.
authentic truth. And the
Mhm.
thing that is so encouraging is that God's word is authentic truth. Like there is
Yeah.
nothing that we can take away from that is not
Yeah.
authentic truth.
Yeah.
And it's causing people in my generation, I'm 45, to be like, oh, we need to be like, not so much like on our toes, but like, we don't have to sugarcoat this stuff. Like
Yeah.
literally, people just want to know the truth. It's so, so great.
Yeah.
You say this, you say, if we live to know him, then even the wilderness of the soul cannot extinguish our faith. It is the
Mhm.
answer to an increasingly burnout deconstructing church that struggles to know the worth of Christianity. Living
Yeah.
to know him is going
Yeah.
to combat that. I'm
Absolutely.
I love it so much, so much.
Mm.
This book, Experiencing Friendship with God, How the Wilderness Draws Us to His Presence. It came out yesterday, you guys. I want you to pick it up. I want you to get it, no matter where you are in your season of life. It's going to meet you right where you are. Faith, I want to know
Mm.
this. What are you reading these days? What are you loving?
Oh my gosh, I am knee deep in The Night is Normal by Alicia Britt Jolie. I mean, I love Alicia, and I feel like just small talk with her transforms my life.
Right?
So, and I'm getting through this one slowly. I've actually been
Mm,
on it for a month,
mhm,
but it's just because every chapter is so rich. I'm
mhm.
like, 2 pages. Let me put it down. I got to think about what she just said. So yeah, I'm in that one. Love it.
I love Alicia so much. Did you know that she
Mhm.
was an atheist before she started following
Yeah.
Jesus?
Yes.
She's been on the happy hour a handful of times. In fact, I think she's been on
Mhm.
twice this year, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But this summer she came on and shared her story of meeting Jesus in the back of a church,
Mhm.
just feeling like he was calling her name, and he
Yeah.
was. And she grew up atheist, and I just loved her story so
Yeah.
much.
Yes. Yeah, she's so great. I mean, I think what I love about her, she talks about the presence of God in such an intelligent way.
Hmm.
Because I think sometimes we can make the topic of the presence of God like almost like a fairy tale, like it's like a
Mm,
floofy, like ethereal, like just random spirituality that we
yeah.
can make it about. But Alicia, she really talks about the presence of God in such a almost in an academic, intelligent, very thought out way that I
Mm.
feel like has been so helpful for me. So I love her writing.
I love her writing. I love also small talk with her makes me love Jesus more, which is great.
Yes.
But she is one when you speak of the presence of when your book will be talking about the presence of God.
Yeah.
She is one where I leave her presence and feel like I was with her and God at the same
Yeah.
time. And that's a beautiful thing to be
Yep.
said about someone. Okay, you told me that you watched Severance. Now, is
I
this
love
the
Seven.
show where they go in and give their mind up and like,
Yeah.
okay, I wish I would have known who else talked to me about this show and they
Yeah.
loved it, and I've
Yeah.
just never finished it. And I need you
Yeah.
to encourage me as to why I need to go finish it.
It's just, I mean, I don't even know if I can because it ended on a cliffhanger.
Oh.
And right now I mean, season 2 was supposed to come out this year, but because of all that's going
Uh-huh.
on with
Yeah, the
that
strike and
field,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it's just not happening. And I'm like, no, it's we have to have season 2. So it's torture for me, but I would say I think it's genuinely been one of my favorite television seasons thus far. It's so
Wow.
yeah, it's just brilliant. It's just so much is in the detail where if you watch it
Mm,
again you're like, whoa, it's just even just visually it's just stunning. So I don't know how much you love spoilers, so I'm not going to get
don't
into it,
spoil
but
it. No, 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 no,
yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah.
I think this was my problem is I downloaded it onto my iPad and I would watch it while traveling, but I
Yeah.
would usually be doing something else at the same time. I really try to multitask when I watch TV, and there's some shows that you can, and there's
Yeah.
just some shows that you cannot. Like you need to be
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is Severance is one of those shows, but I mean, it engulfs you. Like
Okay.
you're like, wait, why? How? Like, and so I mean, I love it. I thought it was brilliant.
Have you seen The Bear?
Okay, so my husband is so into it. I only got through half an episode, but
Because
I
you didn't
have
like
been.
it or because you had something else you needed to do?
I think the same reason why you couldn't get into Severance is the same
Uh-huh.
reason why I couldn't get into The Bear.
Okay.
Like I would, because I do the same thing with TV shows as well. Like I like to multitask, and I
Uh-huh.
think when I was starting The Bear, I was like folding laundry or something,
Yeah, yeah.
and like I just like didn't really get into it.
Yeah.
So no, I haven't
Okay, it's
gotten
one of our
into The
favorite
Bear.
shows we've watched this year,
Yeah.
and I just love it so much.
Hmm.
Faith, I'm grateful for you and your ministry and your church and all your kids and all the things you're doing. So thanks so much for coming on the happy hour.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you want more conversations just like that from my podcast, The Happy Hour, check out these links over here. We're going to have more shows for you. And to make sure that you never miss any of our conversations, go ahead and subscribe. I don't know what you're waiting on. Thanks for watching.